It's time to play ball. Welcome to the podcast with no limits. Whether it be sports, current events, or random thoughts, this is the place to step in and stay a while. Your host is a proud alumnus of Rio Hondo Prep, a former minor league baseball umpire, and a man with strong opinions. Welcome to the Get Home Safe podcast and your host, Matt Hersema.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Get Home Safe. We have a guest today. It is a Friday episode. And so as you guys are aware, I'm going right into the episodes, the interviews, if you will, with the guest that we have coming on. And today we are going to be joined by Douglas Kirk. He's a musician in the Bakersfield area, actually played in a band with my girlfriend, Robbie Burns, a few years ago. He plays the bass, but he also has a great history of playing different instruments. And we're going to talk about his musical journey today. So we're going to bring him on the program right now. This is all new video for us in doing these things. So let's see, we're trying something new. We got him in the waiting room. Let's bring him on right now. And there we are. Douglas Kirk, welcome to the Get Home Safe podcast.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Outstanding, Doug. I got to ask you, you're a musician. You like to get out. You like to perform, and not just that, but practice. I mean, this past year, I would say, has had to have been tough for all musicians out there. You're a member of the Angry Bryans band up there in Bakersfield. And just tell me what the last year has been like for you individually with this whole lockdown and everything.
Well, aside from all the changes in routine that everybody's experienced in common, just how it's affected my musical activities. The Angry Bryans mostly works as we mostly do like a outdoor festival kind of show circuit, larger venues and larger events. And so the last year we've had no bookings at all. And in fact, when we were booked last year to play in Las Vegas for St. Patty's Day, which we've done for years now. Mm-hmm. And also the Irish Festival in Henderson, right there next to Vegas, the weekend preceding St. Patty's Day. And unfortunately, as the timing turned out, the festival canceled while we were on our way there. Oh, wow. But we already had the rooms. We already had the rooms booked and everything. And so we said, "Oh well, we'll go hang out for a couple days and enjoy the weekend, and then do the performances on Monday and Tuesday night on Fremont Street." And then we started to hear, mainly on our news feed and stuff, little whisperings of what was going on. Do you remember the whole bizarre toilet paper shortage thing and all that? Yeah. And I'm sort of, it was like from another world. I'm looking at these images and then anyway. But to keep it brief, Fremont Street got shut down on Sunday, the day before we were supposed to perform. So basically we were told sorry, shows are canceled. So do whatever you want, go home. So that was very that was disappointing to say the least. And so that was sort of like the introduction to the following year.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I met you, Douglas, through my girlfriend Robbie Burns played in the band with you, the Angry Bryans, for a short time, and it was fun for me to tag along and just watch you guys and hang out with you guys and learn what went into musicians performing and everything. You guys were very talented. It was fun for me to go to Vegas and watch you guys and just be like, okay, hey, I'm with the band. This is cool. This is a new experience for me. But yeah, you guys traveled all over festivals. She went to Alaska with you guys, and I think you guys performed in Iowa. You guys performed all over. Well-known band.
Yeah.
I got to ask, Valerie's no longer with the band anymore, but how did you and the Angry Bryans come together, since that's a band you've been in for quite some time now?
The drummer, Walter Baldwin, and I
Mhm.
were in a band that was, that you could probably describe as like adult alternative. And we were working together in that band, with other people for about 3 years or so, starting in 2003. And our guitarist, being a younger man, made the decision that you couldn't criticize to serve his country. And so he enlisted in the Navy, so he had to step out. And our singer was looking into a job opportunity in another part of the state. So the band dissolved peaceably.
Mm.
But Walter had already been a fan of the genre that we would become part of, which was basically contemporary bands with sort of a modern sound, but heavily influenced by Celtic music, like traditional Irish music, Scottish tunes, that sort of thing. And so, as the band was dissolving, Walter suggested, hey, I like these kind of bands. I'd like to try a project like that. And, and I was sort of like, well, we're already playing together and I wouldn't mind trying something different. So let's do it. And he played in a traditional pipe and drum band, where it's just like 30 pipers and a guy on a big drum, and then maybe a dozen guys on the Highland snare, which is an instrument that looks like a tom drum, like it's like a foot deep, but it's has such a tight snare sound. It sounds like you're rapping on a table. And they'd march and play, and it's a beautiful sound. Well, he recruited one of the bagpipers and said, we'd like to try this. So when we first got together in the studio that we already had, it was just, myself on bass, Walter on drums, and a bagpipe player named Robbie Burns, coincidentally with that.
Oh, wow. No relation.
Yeah, no relation. And anyway, really interesting guy, born in Ireland, raised in England, and had served in the English Army in their bagpiping troupe. And so they'd actually done ceremonies, performed for the Queen and all that, which, you might get to listen to this, and I got a rib about it. He'd never let anybody forget that. but no, he was a very, very experienced player. But our sound definitely evolved over the years, because if you'd heard us back then, we sounded like, we didn't have any vocals, and it was basically like, and I probably related this story to Valerie too. Robbie would just blaze away at these jigs and reels, and I would just listen in there for sort of implied chords, even though the drones are always in that B flat, but I would listen to the melody and find other chords behind it. And Walt would just blaze away like almost like a punk beat. And so that's all it was just like, it was like the bass player, what was his name? Paul Dirtz or something like that. And then Trey Cool, from the drummer from Green Day, kicking out Billy Armstrong and just getting a bagpipe player.
What's funny with music is that so much of it, if you really think about it, is about just experimentation. Let's start making sounds. Okay, let's blend this. Let's do that.
Right.
And that's what's so great about the art of music, really. And you guys sound like you didn't have a very detailed plan, but you kind of had an idea, and it blended together eventually. And you guys became the Angry Bryans. Now, for those of you who
started out as 1916.
1916. Okay. So take me through that.
Yeah.
Take me through that. Why the original name, and then why later the Angry Bryans?
Well, like we started this was starting in around like 2006. And we decided, right off the bat, we were like, we played at the fair, sort of opening for another band. And so we did like 3 or 4 songs like this at the Kern County Fair. So we got away with it because it was just kind of bizarre enough for people to clap when we were done. And but we were like, obviously this isn't all we're going to do. So we decided, well, we need to get the guitar in there, need to get somebody that could sing, better than me. And so we got Richard Cheney on board, and originally to play guitar, but then he heard a pipe tune that he really liked, and he looked up the words for it that originally had words for it too. And so we started just playing it, and he started singing it. And the other three of us looked at each other like, this is awesome. We don't have to look for a singer. We got both in one guy. And but it started evolving pretty quick as we figured, like, well, we can't do like I said, just the sort of punk 3-piece thing. And as we all started adding our own musical sensibilities and experience into it, it became this like sort of Frankenstein thing that wasn't really traditional, but definitely had all that influence in it. And the name came from Walter threw it out there because, and if he listens to it, he's gonna give me the stink eye for this because I teased him about it. We were very, in a way, here we were like sort of Scottish. We're basing the songs around Highland pipe, melodies, traditional melodies for the most part at first. And wearing kilts, we decided, we're going to sport the tartan like, Robbie and Walt did in their troupe. And but Walt was always a fan of the Irish punk bands and stuff like that too. And so he liked the reference to 1916 because that was the year of the Easter Uprising in Dublin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
And I liked it. And I liked it because it was vague.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes people like choose a name that they mean to be very evocative of a mood. But to me, sometimes it's like assuming that all your stuff's, I mean, it's like you're going, I think we should call ourselves Annihilator, you know what I mean? or Death Clock or whatever, I liked the 1916 because I knew people would be curious about it.
What does that mean? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What does that mean? And it's just, but it sounds historic. And then when people would ask, that some people would know right away. They would go, awesome. And then if some people asking you told them, they're like, that's cool. The first year or so was playing the fair and playing pubs and bars and stuff, Bakersfield, venturing out of town now and then, going down to San Diego, LA, up to Fresno, that sort of thing. But, very quickly we learned that the bands that were already doing this sort of thing that we looked up to were doing these festivals. And that's one thing that was a pleasant surprise for me and gave me a whole different experience as far as performing in public than I'd had before. Was that this was a genre that had an audience that attended events. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's a very, very good point.
You know what I'm saying? And so it was, and it's not like it was because it was like Coachella or Austin City Limits or something. It's smaller, but it was like your county fair, only it would be called like the San Diego Highland Games. And so it had that theme. And because like you've been to quite a few of them with us. Mm-hmm. You get there and everybody's wearing kilts and all the vendors are
except me. No kilt, Doug.
What's
no
that?
Kilt for me. Val still is mad that I haven't worn a kilt yet, but I was the only guy there in the entire fairgrounds that wasn't wearing a kilt.
You know what? It is not. It's a very distinctive piece of attire, but it is not the most practical or comfortable garment. Despite when some people think they're like, oh, that must be nice and cool, and you got all that leg movement, and I'm like, yeah, you ball it all up trying to sit on it in the car.
It's and walking then when around with a blanket, man.
And being more of a, I guess, a bit more formal and stuffy person like myself, that, well, I mean, because I see like some of the younger guys at the events, and they got a t-shirt with the sleeves ripped off and a man bun, and they got the kilt on, but they're sagging it past their knees, and then they're wearing no socks with their Vans on.
Cool guys.
And that's cool. Yeah. And like at first, our guitarist, Richard, he would kind of do it that way and he could pull it off. And I just felt ridiculous if I tried to do that. So I always wore the traditional stockings and the flashers, they call them, you know, with the little, and if not the ghillies like they call them, but I at least wore like, you know, dignified, like black leather shoes and that sort of thing, maybe wear a vest, you know, but once you do all that, you're so covered up and bound up and the kilt goes over your belly button and you got like a 3-inch wide belt, believe me. Oh. And all the events are outside and it's always during the warm parts of the year. So you get back to the room and you're just dank and damp all over. And it would be like a ritual. Me and Rich used to like room together all the time. And you get back to the room and you just like strip down to your boxers, you know, scratch your legs and you're just like,
let it breathe. Let it
breathe.
breathe.
You know? Now, of course, as you probably heard, like a lot of the guys like to go they think the traditional way to wear one is with no undergarments.
No chance.
That's what, and Walt always did that. So he always, he insisted on it. So he was always a little breezier, but honestly, to me, it didn't make that much difference. We all left sweat on the stage.
Oh boy. Drummers, you know? Doug, drummers. I mean,
well,
the guys in the
Walter,
back. Walter's
Walter. He has to do everything like all the way, kind of, you know. So definitely a louder personality than me. I don't know how we stayed friends all these times. You know?
Opposites attract, man. Opposites attract.
Ever seen the movie Sideways?
No, but now I definitely need to.
Anyway, I'm just saying we're in a way we're like an odd couple, you know.
I love it. Well, let me ask you that kind of, the music, the sound, it all works. It's all so super unique. I was so proud of Val for playing with you guys. When I first heard her explaining it all to me, and then like, it's a Celtic rock sound, and then she played for me some of the music. I was like, oh wow, you're gonna play this, and then to see you guys on stage was really something else. And kind of back to the name thing, I got to ask you this because one of my favorite movies is That Thing You Do, and Tom Hanks
I've seen that.
starred and directed, and a couple funny things in it. One is the bass player, which you're the bass player. The bass player in the movie, they never say his name. He's always the bass player. That's his title. Hey, the bass player. And even in the end credits, it says TB player. And so it's kind of the running joke of Hey, where's
I didn't know they did it in the credits too.
Yeah. Oh, it's hilarious. But when they came up with their name in the movie, they wanted to be the Wonders. We're the Wonders. Right. And they tried to complicate it by saying, well, we're going to be the one, like ONE Durs, the Wonders. Right. And everyone's like, hey, who are these Oneaters? The Onetters?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so finally there's like, just be the Wonders, WONDER. Right. So that was one of my favorite movies. But anyway, when did you guys then go to become the Angry Bryans?
It was right around the end, 2014. We were getting ready to release our album, We Came to Fight, in early 2000. Let me see. Yeah, it was early 2015. But for at least a year and a half coming up to that, we started, as we spread out, as we started to go venture further east and get a little bit of a reputation in that genre, we kept bumping into a band called 1916.
Really?
that was based out of Rochester, New York.
Oh man.
And they were pretty good. They were different than us. They were more of like what Walt would call like an Irish punk band. Didn't have a bagpipe player. I think there was like drums, bass, 2 guitars, and I think sometimes they would have like somebody pop in on a whistle or fiddle. And I thought they were pretty good. But their sound wasn't that much like ours. But we kept bumping into them, and I wasn't paying attention to a lot of that, but I was hearing it from our manager and a couple of my bandmates. And I guess and also our management, BT Entertainment, was trying to get some interest from some smaller labels, or some labels that had a department under them that worked that recorded this genre. and they said they might be interested, but they were aware of that issue, and and I guess they basically told the management that we would rather you resolve that now than it become an issue that we have to resolve later. And we'd had some personnel changes over the years anyway, so we just decided, yeah, let's go ahead and just change our name. Walt said he was tired of explaining to people what 1916 meant. and that's why he always dumped it on me, And he said, I'm sick of people asking what 1916 means anyway. So we said, let's go ahead and change it.
So then I got to ask you, I mean, it's not like you guys solved the problem necessarily, because you guys changed your name to the Angry Bryans. No one in the band's name is Brian. So how did, people
well, here's how it kind of happened. We started tossing out names, and Richard and I, being the more nerdy, serious ones in the band, we're trying to think of things with like historical reference or some kind of gravitas or something, or like one Rich tossed out was now I'm going to screw it up now. Morrigan, because I guess in Celtic legend there was a goddess of battle or something like that called Morrigan, and some of the other people in the band thought it sounds like Morrissey. People are going to go Morrigan. How do you spell that and all that,
Yeah.
And I don't remember who tossed it out first, and we went through a bunch of names, and we're doing a thing where like everybody writes down a few names and then you Google it and find out it's being used already. And but somebody tossed out the Angry Bryans, and originally what they said they meant was because our manager's name, and by this time he was touring around with us, and you've met him, Brian Tower, and everybody said, the Angry Bryans, because there's Brian and he's always freaking angry. And at first, like, me and Richard were just like, it sounds goofy, like I don't really like it, but it wound up getting on the short list of 3, and we said, okay, let's give these names to Brian and the man and the label guy he's talking to, and let them decide. And so that's how he wound up with it. And actually, one thing that helped it grow on me, that made me maybe accept it a little bit more, was they pointed out there were other bands in our genre that were doing that sort of like adjective name kind of thing, like the sort of like Flogging Molly, Black Eyed Dempsey's, Dropkick Murphys. So they said, so the Angry Bryans, it kind of fits that. So
yeah, it's a good name.
And and honestly, just like any band name, I mean, I remember even when I was a kid, I thought, like, really, the Beatles, for the scope and the depth of their music and all that, they could have gotten away with anything really pretentious if they wanted to. But like the Beatles, and now you can't even imagine another name for the band. After a year or two, I was like, I can't imagine being called something else,
Oh yeah. No, and then again, Val's not with the band anymore, but a lot of the consistencies have stayed. You talked about the kilts, the girls wear the mini kilts, Rich and of course Walt, or when Rich was a singer and a guitarist for the band, they're pretty out there and radical dudes. And I always appreciated your look, Doug, because you always had that, you always threw like some kind of hat on, which I always liked. You stood out a little bit, kind of quietly doing your thing, but also not just quietly. I mean, you were an integral part of it all, singing vocals. And I don't have a great music ear, but I can tell, when those necessary parts, such as the bass parts, do come in pretty clutch. So I always appreciated you as a standout member of the band. Your vocals, Doug, very underrated vocals as well.
Well, I always knew that, and I've actually been working on them because I've been recording some stuff myself. So I took some vocal coaching from a teacher here in town, and it's helped a lot. I got comfortable with the backing vocal thing, so I never really worked on it that much.
Mhm.
I just kind of knew that the level I was at, that I was acceptable as a backing vocalist, but I wasn't strong enough to really lead a band. So yeah, so we always found somebody. It was too easy to find somebody way better.
Those
And
singers,
we
yeah.
only and we're on our third person now, and unfortunately, like she's only really done like 2 gigs with us.
Oh,
They
really?
actually are three really,
Yeah, that's
because
right. Yeah.
our introductory gig in Vegas 2 years ago, and then a small event down in Ventura, and then a festival in Moab, Utah
Mhm.
in November of 19. And then we were gearing up for like, okay, we're going to hit 20 and hit the ground running in Vegas. And I already told you that story. So we haven't performed since. So in a way, you know, she's been with us a little over a year, but we've hardly performed that much. We did do some recordings and did 3 songs that we put online, and she's on those and sounds great.
Let me ask you this, because I don't have a ton of music experience, but this always baffles me with musicians and singers. I don't care if it's the guitar, if it's the piano, if it's the drums. I cannot comprehend how people play an instrument and sing at the same time. I can't wrap my head around it. I think playing is hard enough, singing is hard enough. To do those 2 things at the same time, even if it's just background vocals. I mean, am I crazy, or is that kind of a real challenging aspect of music?
It's a hurdle to get over, but then once you learn to do it a little bit, then it's easier to do it a little bit. It gets easier and easier to do it a little bit more.
Okay.
So, you know, and you're kind of handicapped because you can't play and sing at the same time, even if you were a great singer.
Yeah,
You know,
all I can play is the trumpet.
You'd
Yeah,
have to do like the kind of blues thing, you know, you'd have to do some like licks on the trumpet and then belt out some lines, and then, you know,
even if the trumpet's down, you're out of breath. You know, I don't know if
right.
ska guys do that or not, because the trumpet isn't playing the whole song. But yeah, I'm
Right.
just like, my lips are swollen and I'm done for
Yeah.
my little trumpet experience. Well, let me ask you, Doug. Let's go back to kind of your childhood and kind of your introduction to music. First of all, where did you grow up? Were you always a Californian?
No, I was born in Quantico, Virginia.
Wow.
At the naval base there. Both of my parents were in the service.
Oh, okay.
So, but we didn't live there. I was just born there, I guess, because it was the closest hospital. And then my dad went to Vietnam, and he was in the Marine Corps. He wasn't drafted. He was already enlisted. So, let's see, 39, 49. So, sorry, I was just pausing to hazard a guess. I think he enlisted around like 57 or so.
Okay.
So he'd already been in for a while when he did his tours over there. And my mom and myself went up to stay with his family in New York, where he was from. And so we moved around the East Coast a little bit. Then wound up in Washington State, Puget Sound area, lived in around Tacoma, Washington.
Oh.
And then my folks separated, and then I wound up down here in Bakersfield. And when I got here at first, I didn't like the climate, and I didn't have any friends. So I was thinking, I'm going back up north as soon as I can. But it took me a couple years to do that, and it was very disappointing to see that none of my friends waited for me to come back. They all had more important things to do, so they all had lives, and so a lot of them left the Tacoma area. So I worked at a call center up there for a while, and then came back down here. And and probably everybody's heard, either tells a story like this or hears a story like this. After I was down here for a while and put down some roots, and especially now that I've been down here like a long time now, I wouldn't change it, because even if I can go back in time and and stay up there, I wouldn't have anybody that's in my life now in my life, except for my brothers and my mother,
So how old were you when you came to Bakersfield?
16.
And was Bakersfield your first city you visited in California?
No, when I was really little, for a while, mom and dad lived in Anaheim.
Oh, okay.
And I don't remember that much, but I see the Disneyland pictures.
Yeah.
And my mom was in the Marine Corps, and she would come down to Camp Pendleton for training every year, like they're sort of doing boot camp again kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we'd been to a few places in California, but I didn't really know it well. And when we were moving down here, my mom had a job lined up from a Marine Corps buddy, and originally in San Luis Obispo. And it actually fell through while we were in transit. And so she called some other Marine Corps buddies, basically putting out like an alert to all of them. We're moving to California. We don't know where we're going yet, kind of thing. And she had a good Marine Corps buddy that lived here in Bakersfield.
Okay.
And got her a job with Unical, which doesn't exist anymore, but is a petroleum company. And and so we wound up here.
So it's always funny to me, like, I tease Bakersfield and I'm a lifelong, LA County guy. And, it's like, anything north of Bakersfield, that's like Oregon, is kind of my running joke. But, I can't imagine, setting up shop in Bakersfield and being like, oh, here we are, Californians, it's just like totally different up there.
Like I said, at first there were a lot of things I didn't care for about it. But then once I started making friends and working with people and getting to know the place, and, to me, and it's changed a lot since I've been here. And honestly, now I might be biased because I've lived here a long time, and so there's some appeal just because of the familiarity to it. But it's grown so much; it's more than tripled in size since I moved here.
Wow!
So there's a certain degree of, it's going to become a little bit more cosmopolitan just because of that, because you just have so much more new influences.
Oh yeah,
and more venues opening up, and at first, when I first moved here, all I heard was mopey people saying there's nothing to do because well, down where you live, you're in almost like a quilt of communities that just merge into one sea of restaurants and venues and theater groups and sports arenas. And, you where you almost think I could never explore all of it in a lifetime.
True. And
Bakersfield being, a little bit more of an island, people would say, oh, there's nothing to do here. And as I got more involved in stuff around town, I would tell them, well, what is it you're into that you want to do? Well, I'm into the theater and stuff. And I would say, you've got 4 local theaters and they do great work. Have you tried out for any of those plays? There was one I heard about the other day. No. Then I'm like, oh, well, then keep your moping to yourself, they have to, to me, it's like this defeatist attitude, like there's nothing going on here, but my life would be 4th of July if I lived down in LA.
Oh yeah. It's not like that all the time. We do have a lot of options. I don't doubt, a lot of options, even though this past year has been shut down. But so I think about that often, like as far as moving out of here, which I want to do someday.
Now you live in Upland?
We are out in Val is from Upland. We now live in East Vale. We're looking to move maybe back towards that area, Ontario or something like that here in the next few months.
Okay.
But so we are, I think, we're Riverside County, right? So we're out of LA County, which is actually
okay.
But anyway, we're not too far from Anaheim, actually, Doug. You're
okay.
your early spots. But so let me ask you this, Mr. Kirk, when did music kind of become of interest to you? Was it a young age? Was it later in life? Kind of, what was your musical beginning, and maybe some of the early instruments you played and what you saw in the future for yourself playing music?
I think when I was little, I just liked, like a lot of people, I liked listening to music. And everybody, I think everybody likes listening to music, but I mean, I would just immerse myself in it and think about all the parts going on in it and why it sounds the way it does all together. My dad played guitar, and he played like some folk kind of stuff, like almost a sort of Pete Seeger kind of stuff. But then he also experimented with like kind of flamenco music and stuff like that. All this is on an acoustic guitar, but he was also into music too. And sometimes he put the splitter adapter and plug in the old rifle range, big fat 70s headphones, and we'd both sit in front of the stereo together, and he'd put on music and we'd listen to it together. And so we'd listen to like Moody Blues and Led Zeppelin and other stuff he had. And so I guess you could say I was just a really like avid listener and enjoyer of music. But then I think it was like in 5th grade, we would have bands, like school bands from other schools, come visit and perform. And so I'm in the auditorium with my friends, and like I said, this is at the elementary school, and I'm in 5th grade. And I think it was the band from one of the local high schools. And they had, it was a small band. They had, the brass section and all that, but they also included, just to kind of kick it up a little bit, they also had a guy on a small kit, and they had a kid playing bass guitar. And that wasn't my focus at the time, even though coincidentally I later played it. But so you had this kind of rock rhythm section, but then this whole brass thing going on. And they were playing like rock hits from the radio. They played a couple little classical things, but I remember they played Smoke on the Water. And it just floored me. I can't explain why. I mean, because I'd heard stuff on the radio, but because it was live and it was loud, and seeing them play it, you know what I mean? It was like, and of course they're doing the leads on the horns, so it's like,
Well, that intro. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But when they busted into the what I guess you'd call the riff, do 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 do, and then they're going bum 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 with the bass behind it. I just remember embarrassing myself because I was like, my gushing enthusiasm was like on my sleeve, and I just looked at my buddy next to me, and I swear, I think I said the exact words. It was just something like this. I just looked at my friend and I go, "Band is bad." I go, "Band is bad, man." And I could remember other kids turning around and give me that like eye rolling look, like what a dork,
Yeah.
Well, and
go right ahead.
And I was going to say, so I joined the school band.
Oh, okay. So that's what did it for you.
Begged mom and dad, can you rent me a trumpet? And I played the band, and I did that up till my sophomore year or so.
What was your early impressions of playing the trumpet? Because I started from scratch in 7th grade. I had sang in elementary school or whatever. I had no idea how to read music or any of that. My father had played trumpet. My grandfather had played trumpet. So I had a lot to live up to. And
oh, boy.
I fell in love with it. I did okay early on. I got much better. But some of my biggest surprises was like what you had to do with your lips, like to get into this tiny crevice and to make these different sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, what were your initial challenges, or maybe the things you liked about playing the trumpet so early on?
I probably had the same kind of challenges. I mean, the first thing is just generating a sound out of it, because it's not natural at first. Your instinct, you're 10 or 11 years old, and you just put your lips on it or put your lips against it, or on the outside rim of the mouthpiece, and you just think you blow like a kazoo.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing they teach you. I think I remember, like, our teacher used to make us just take the mouthpiece and get the out of it almost. And but yeah, that was the first hurdle, was just getting a clean tone out of it.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And being able to modulate the note a little bit by just going from like a E to a D to a C, maybe a B. And but then, as you're well aware, there's a point where it's like, since you make your you make your trumpet's voice crack by using your lips to go shift up to that next gear, up and down those gears. And for those of and for the folks in the audience that haven't played an instrument with a mouthpiece, that's why when you hear like a piece like Taps, or what's the what's the one that's sort of like is it Reverie? Reveille. Okay. Yeah, folks, when you hear the Taps and the Reveille, and it's on a bugle and it doesn't have any keys, so all those notes are just by the lips modulating the pitch shifts up and down on the mouthpiece,
which you can do on a trumpet. It's the same fingering, either open or one finger or the other finger.
You can pick a key and when you can do that, when you're a beginning trumpet player and you can do that, you're so pleased with yourself. Like, that's so much. You know what I mean? Because you're like, I got the lip thing down now.
Yeah, exactly. And just the different tones and everything. What I love about the trumpet, and I miss playing, I wish I could play more. And, I got to play for a lot of different things, but what I love about the trumpet is the sound. It can be a marching band sound. It could be in rock music. It's probably really good sounding in jazz. A muted trumpet is one of the sweetest sounds you'll hear.
Oh yeah.
It's in orchestras. It's in church music. It's in all this wide variety of music. And you could say that about any instrument, but I truly believe the trumpet really does shine in all the various genres of music. So that's why I've always loved it.
That's a very good point. And that's why it's sort of like when a lot of people think of a brass instrument, it's the one they think of.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because it has so many it's like a human voice in a way. You know what I mean? You can sound like Billie Eilish. You can sound like Johnny Cash. You can sound like Michael Stipe, and like you said, with the trumpet and trumpeters have, there's players like Lester Young and Miles Davis that had a distinctive, like what some players called kind of a puckered sound. You can, and people, and this isn't my insight, even though I enjoy trumpet playing, and I also enjoy jazz music, even though I don't play it a lot on the bass. But I'm a big Miles Davis fan.
Good music.
And look at all the different tones he gets. And then, of course, he played the flugelhorn too sometimes. But yeah, like trumpet players develop their own distinctive tone that people recognize. And the instrument itself is an inanimate object. Except for the valves, you know what I'm saying? But they're generally the same material, the same length of the tubing, the mouthpieces are the same. You can hand it around to different people and they play it, but then you hand it to a certain person, and all of a sudden this different sound comes out.
Yeah. And anytime I hear Louis Armstrong, I'm just like, oh, I need a moment. Let me just wait. But for me, this is another thing. I talked about singing and playing. This is another thing that baffles me. Now, being a trumpet guy, there's 3 valves. All right. Yeah. And there's only a certain combination you can have, 2 down, I think 2 and 3, 1, 2, I don't understand I see clarinets or saxophones or guitarists with the multiple combinations. I can only use 3 fingers, man. That's all I got. Right. I can't do all these 2-hand stuff.
I think I can relate to what you're saying, because I've experimented with some other instruments, and at least with and I play guitar too. So like I play more than one string and move around, but at least with a guitar, you can look at it and when you glance down at the neck, there's a certain like visual logic to it, because it's, I don't want to use the word linear, that might be misleading, but you look at a single string, and as you move up, as you move towards the bridge from the nut on the string, as you go up each fret, you're incrementally going up in pitch. So you can see that, like, that makes sense. You could play a simple tune on one string, and go da. Well, like, you guys can't see me, but you know what I mean? You can go da 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 da,
Yeah.
and you can kind of see it. And then you catch on that the reason there's multiple strings is so that you got more range, because as you get to a certain fret, then it's like the string above it or below it, can take over at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And, but well, I was going to say, the reason I can relate to what you're saying is I've picked up a few other instruments and my daughter played flute for a while, and then she grew tired of it and decided that she maybe might want to play the fiddle instead. And she goes, "I'm sorry, that you rented the flute." And I said, "That's okay." Because I love this. I love the voice of the flute and music. And so I said, I told my daughter, I said, "No, that's okay. I'm going to keep renting it for a while because I think I want to learn to play it." And so I rented it for like about another month because all of a sudden I had the whole embouchure problem again, because it's different. You have the little like slot in the little curve thing and you blow over it. And it was so frustrating that was so hard for me to get a note out of it without moving it. And then I'm looking at all those valves, it looks like a shrunken sideways saxophone, and it doesn't have any logic to it. And I'm like, at that point, I was probably about like 35 or 36. And I was just like, I was like the old dog learning a new trick. It's like, I'll just use the instruments I know how to play.
Yeah.
I'm not going to learn how to play this stupid thing. I'll just find somebody else to play it with me,
Well, don't get me started. Don't get me started on the bagpipes, Doug. They got fingers.
Yeah.
They're blowing. They're doing this thing with the bag. They're doing 4 things at once. I'm like, and they're holding it. I'm like, I don't know how you guys do that. Bagpipers, you're a special breed.
I'm surprised that. Have you ever? I'm surprised Valerie hasn't tried to show you how to play.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea.
Okay. But if you ask her to like really explain it to you, there's in a way there's a lot going on there, but in a way there's some simplicity to it, because those drones are just tuned to a chord. Mm-hmm. And so they play themselves, and she's reinflating the bladder with her breaths and then squeezing it with her arm. And so the air is being forced out of the bladder into the chanter, which is basically like the little recorder like you would use in school. I think it only has like 9 notes.
Three valves and lips, Doug. That's all
Yeah.
they got. 3 valves and lips.
That's probably something all of us musicians have in common. It's like, we got an instrument that baffles other people. Mm-hmm. They're like, "Oh, I don't understand how you get a sound out of the thing when you blow in it. How do you play all those notes and you only got 3?" They probably say you only got 3 notes on the thing. How do you play those? And it's your special little wizard secret. They're like, "Oh, I don't understand how you play that." And then we look at other people's instruments. "I don't understand how you play that."
Yeah.
And what's scary is I know I have musician friends that play like a dozen different instruments that aren't even in the same instrument family. We're talking about flute. I have a friend who's a local musician. His name's Tony Rinaldi, and he plays. He's amazing on the keyboards, and that's what he stays the most busiest doing, performing and instructing and stuff. But just to rub my face in it, he also plays bass, like at least is not better than I do. Plays the flute, and he does this while he's performing too. He'll be doing stuff on the keyboard, and then he'll pick up the flute and hold it by the mic and start playing the flute, and then do stuff. I just like, okay, you just keep learning. You just keep learning instruments, I have another friend I haven't spoken to in a while. I think he moved out of town. Named Victorio, and I don't know how many instruments he plays, but to him it's a fascination. He hears an instrument and he just has to learn how to play it. And so the great thing is if he wants to record stuff, I mean, he can layer so many different sounds, jump into different bands or groups performing. It's like, oh, you don't know, does anybody know somebody that plays zither? And he can be like, I do.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's crazy. All the guys that can play so many different instruments, talented indeed. Last thing I'll say about the trumpet, you touched on a little bit, like it can be somber sounding, like taps, like a lowering of the flag. And it also upbeat energy, raise the flag. Like, that's what I love about the only instrument I know how to play. But let me ask you this, Doug, when did you put the trumpet down and then transition to pick up the bass guitar? I would think those are two kind of polar opposites. So what's the story behind that?
By the time I was like a freshman, I'd always been exposed to popular music. So I appreciated the classical music, and I'd listen to some classical pieces because the band was performing them. But the school band was also, because this is the late 70s, the school band is also performing pop hits as a band. So we're doing Chicago tunes, Saturday in the Park, that sort of thing. And I'm listening to that stuff on the radio, mostly AM radio. My dad was more into like prog rock and FM radio kind of stuff. So me and him would listen to that, and he would kind of show that kind of stuff to me. And so it wasn't a sudden jump, but it was just like exploring, like becoming aware of this other world that gave me different feelings. Like, I remember I had like John Williams music because I would like, I had a cassette that had the Star Wars soundtrack on it.
He's the best. I love John Williams.
And I would listen to it and try and sometimes play along with parts of it on the trumpet. But then I would listen to this other music and not hearing horns in it. And I was excited about the way it made me feel. And then my dad was already playing guitar. So I would pick up his guitar and he would show me a few chords, but when he wasn't around, I would play along with pop songs that I would like, and I would hear the bass line in it and play along with the bass line. Of course, it sounds funny, because it's an octave higher on the guitar. Doesn't have the same impact, but at the time, I mean, I'm just a kid. I was just excited that I was following along with the song, and I was playing a lot of like, kind of R&B kind of pop stuff. I think one I distinctly remember was I would have fun sitting and playing Heart of Glass by Blondie because it was really simple. It's just doom 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 doom, and I was like just proud of myself that I was nailing all the chord changes, just going from the doom 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 doom, and then and so that's when I started listening to that stuff and getting more excited about that than the trumpet. When my folks separated and we moved, I didn't join the school band. And instead I went to a pawn shop and got a bass guitar. And I plugged it into the old component stereo that my dad let me have back when you had like this big amplifier, and then you would put the tuner and the turntable on top of it and stack them and plug them in together. The amp component had an input on the front that just said microphone, so you could plug the guitar into that and pump it through the big fat speakers. So that was exciting for me, the first time I had a real bass guitar and plugged it into something that could actually crank out some bass and played along with the song. I was hooked.
Wow.
So after that, and I always still strummed on guitar a little bit and got a little better at it. And I play it pretty good now, but I'm definitely, at the risk of sounding immodest, I think I've become a really proficient rhythm player. And and probably just because, you know, bass is a rhythm instrument. So, and I think rhythmically, and I like rhythmically complicated music. So I get around on those chord changes and different rhythms on the guitar. But when it comes to a solo, it becomes very composed and more like quick riffs on the bass, kind of a feel to it on the guitar. I can never pull off like a really emotional solo on the guitar. I haven't really learned that language yet. But yeah, once I started playing like a real bass and playing along with, you know, the way I basically learned was I would just put a cassette of something I liked in the boombox and turn it up, and then turn my dad's amp up next to it and just play along with the song. And then every time I grooved up, I just rewind it a little bit, listen to it. What did they do there? Oh, okay, we went up there and back. Okay, and then find it on the bass, and then start the song over until I worked my way through it.
Don't you think? Well, let me. Do you think that with, you know, the bass kind of being in the background, the rhythmic sound, harmony at times, you know, do you think that maybe because of that, it's not the melody, the big shining, you know, sound,
Yeah.
that maybe because of that, mistakes or hiccups can go unnoticed a little bit more to the untrained ear? I know you hear it, or, you know, other people will hear it, but you know what I'm trying to say? Do you think that because it's kind of, wait, well, you know, people, oh, well, that sounded weird, but not really put their finger on it?
No, I see what you're saying, and it's at this point, it's harder for me to put myself in that mindset of hearing it like somebody that doesn't listen for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think I can imagine, and and I agree. There's probably a lot of styles of music where if it was just one note for a beat, that it wouldn't sound as jarring. Let's say, especially like if the vocalist missed a note.
Yes.
You know, that lead melody is, you know, people can tell immediately if something's not quite right. You know, whereas on the bass and popular music, a lot of popular music, you could probably get away with a little hiccup there now and then. Of course, I mean, when I was learning to play, I gravitated towards music where the bass was really significant in the music. You know what I mean? So I was listening to, you know, Rush, the Police, the Beatles. You know, I mean, bands were like the bassists were like writing the music, and and the bass was a very distinctive part of the music. I mean, there's a lot of like a lot of songs by the Police, for example, where the guitar, Andy Summers' guitar, is very almost sort of like watercolory, and either providing a sort of rhythmic thing or like jazzy watercolor things going on. Like think of that song "Walking on the Moon" by the yeah. I mean, so I'm saying it's like,
oh yeah,
it's almost like in that sense, he doesn't have to move around as fast. You know, when the world is running down, it's like almost like the bass riff is what's carrying it, driving the song. That in the, you know, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not, I totally acknowledge that the bass is more of an ensemble instrument. There are bass players that have careers where they've turned the bass into either a solo instrument or a lead instrument. But I think for a lot of people, that's like an acquired taste, you know?
Oh yeah. And, you know, my music teacher always told me, hey, the most important note is the last one of the song. And the second one is the first note. It's a first impression, last impression. You know, everything in the middle is okay. When I think of bass players, you mentioned some great bands there. I think Fleetwood Mac, Lindsey Buckingham, to me, is one of the just all timers. I don't know where you stand on that, but you know, because he could do some solo stuff. I think let's put it this way, Doug, maybe you probably agree with this. There's not enough solo bass, bass lines in music where they feature the bass artist for a good portion of the song. At least that's my opinion.
No, there aren't a lot. And I think because of just the voice of the instrument being like, I mean, generally a custom tone that people are, it's low register, not always very bright sounding, because that can sound jarring to people. There's a lot of bassists that I like that prefer a more bright, trebly, growly sound, a more aggressive sound. But now, I mean, so you're talking about like John Mcbee, the bassist for Fleetwood Mac?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, yeah. And now he's a good example of like, he's not flashy, but he's very solid groove and very precise. And when he does move around, it complements the song very nicely. But you're saying now, you've heard of like Les Claypool.
Yes.
Primus. I mean, he's created a distinctive style on the bass, and he has a unique voice, and then his band built that stuff around the bass. But it's not a playing style and a tone and everything that would work in every other kind of ensemble. It would just be too cluttery. You wouldn't hear most of it anyway. And but like I said, his band built around it. And I coincidentally enough, Les Claypool is a big Geddy Lee fan, so he loves Rush too.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I mixed up the John Mcbee and Lindsey Buckingham there. Sorry about that.
So Lindsey Buckingham, I love too. I mean,
yeah,
like
solid.
his vocals and his guitar playing and his writing,
incredible stuff. Well, let's see here, Doug, as far as guitar playing and being involved in different bands, where are some of the best places you have traveled to perform? What are some of your favorite memories? It could be the venue. It could be the amount of people. It could be just a place you've never been to perform or something. I don't know, anything memorable. What are some of the best memories in performing in different locations that you've experienced?
Wow. Well, you're onto something when you mention those different factors.
Yeah.
Like as far as like the venue, the audience, the size of it, because like I said, some of I think the ones that stick the most in my mind, well, aside from the ones that stick in my mind the most as the most disastrous ones, so we'll just like set those. We'll put those in a folder and set them over here for a second.
We could hear those too. We could hear those too. That's fine.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, as a musician, I'm sure you've experienced a few disasters too. So, but no, I think the things that always stick out to me are when it was the first performance, that where one of those factors was something really different for the first time.
Yeah,
I still remember the first time I performed outside of the school band, and the school bands used to tour around and play at other schools. So, I remember we had uniforms and we would go out of town, and we'd go from Tacoma to like Renton or Steilacoom or Seattle or something and play for a school up there. And those were more like field trips, and they were fun. And when you're in a band and there's like 35 other people, you're seated,
yeah.
I only did the marching thing a few times, but yeah, when you're seated in rows and there's 35 of you in uniform, and then there's an auditorium of people, that stage fright thing really doesn't come into it, except that maybe a little bit of like, I don't want to screw up and like have my bandmates next to me or the director glare at me, but the first time I remember performing in a rock band setting was with a couple coworkers back in 91 at another coworker's party, and he had acres of land inherited from his mom up near Porterville in the middle of nowhere. So this was sort of like a bottom drawer Burning Man kind of thing, where it was just like he had a barn that was missing one wall, and that sort of became like the bandstand. And then the field was just full of people, and there were oil drums with fires going in them. So it was like a lot of people. And I'm part of this 3-piece, and we just been in our friend's garage writing stuff. And we're opening for a band. And I remember they were called Crisis.
Oh, I kind of like that.
Yeah. And they were, and to me at the time, because like I hadn't done this before, you know, I show up and I'm wearing like, I'm just wearing like a regular shirt, like I got on now, and a pair of jeans, you know, and these guys were like a little more like professional, at least like on a local level, at least like where they played around on a Southern California kind of level. So they're all looking, you know, very professional for the early 90s, you know, and they were a little bit behind the times in a way, because they weren't like proto grunge. They were more like full on like 80s leather kind of look. But we're talking to them and chatting to them, and it just struck me that the guy that was the lead singer, you know, and I'm a young man at the time. And so at the time I'm looking at him and I'm thinking like, this guy's obviously an older man with makeup and dyed hair and stuff. But they were great. They were great guys. We had our turn. We played like the 4 songs we knew and got polite applause in between. And one criticism we got later is that we were so used to interacting with each other that we didn't interact with the crowd. Ooh. So on a scale of 1 to 10, like a score of 1 to 10 for like stage presence, they would probably round it up to a 1. Like we were probably like at a 0.7 and they would give us a 1, sure. You know, because we were basically, somebody was saying like, we're like, can we join this jam session or something? It was like, we were playing with each other, you know? So I avoided the stage fright thing by just like, not hardly looking at the audience, you know?
Yeah.
Later, as I started joining bands, like, you know, bigger bands with more experience, we played at I don't even remember, I don't think it's open anymore, a mid-sized venue here in Bakersfield. And I think it was called the Casablanca. And because it also was part of a hotel. And I definitely remember that one as exciting, because it was the first time that I felt like I was confident enough with the music and the crowd really appreciated. And I experienced that weird kind of feedback where when the crowd's into it, you feel more confident, relaxed, and you feel like you can, for lack of a better phrase, kind of ham it up a little bit more, like kind of do the rock star poses.
Yeah.
I went from there to another local group that I was with for like at least like 4 years, and they were called Grass House. And they were all very talented guys and much younger than me. By now I'm like in my late 20s. These guys were all just getting out of high school, but they were almost like prodigies for their age, you know? And I still stay in touch with a couple of them. And one of them became a best friend, and he's coincidentally in a well-known Celtic rock band called Gaelic Storm. It's kind of weird. We kind of wound up in that same kind of place, you know? But we started going out of town and playing places, but we played a outdoor festival up in Modesto. And I remember that show because it was the first time I got like out on a big stage outside, and there was a bunch of people. And, you know, in my inexperienced imagination at the time, I could stick that in my head and then let with years go by, let the memory morph into it seeming like Woodstock. Yeah. But just all the people, I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to eat up a lot of time just going incrementally, but a couple others that really stick out. One that Valerie was part of, that was, we'd been doing the Fremont Street experience in Vegas since 2011 or something. And Valerie, I think, okay, she came on board with us to become our new piper, and we still had our original lead guitarist and lead vocalist, and my songwriting partner, Richard Cheney. and he stayed on board for the remainder of 2017 to kind of like, we had people on the sidelines that we were training, but he stayed on board to see us through these really high profile gigs that we had already contracted for. And so Valerie went with us on those. So we went to Alaska and Denver and did those. And we still had Rich. But at the end of 2017, Rich did his last show with us. And then, so we brought in our guitarist, Zach, and our new vocalist, Shay. Mm-hmm. And so now it was like, now we had our new lineup. You know, we had Zach Wolpert on guitar and backing vocals, had Shay Munoz on lead vocal. And we were under a lot of pressure because, in some ways, because all the promoters and our fans were so used to like Richard's voice.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I felt like that I had to overcome a couple times is, you know, the surviving core of the original band is myself and Walter, the bass player and the drummer. And I would tell my friends, I felt like this is like you're telling the promoter, yeah, you can get Aerosmith. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, but Joe Perry and Steven Tyler aren't in the band anymore, but they still got the original drummer and bass player. And they're like, oh yeah, can we call you back? But I think because of that pressure, it lit the proverbial fire under our ass, you know, we were like deadly serious about it. And we worked so hard and rehearsed so much and stepped up our stage game. Walt had a friend make us these light boxes where you step on the plexiglass and light comes out of it. And we were trying to incorporate that. We were just taking things to another level. And so those Fremont Street shows were really the debut of this new lineup. And those shows still stand out to me. Those Fremont Street nights still stand out to me as some of the best like live music experiences I've ever had. Just mm-hmm. the energy, the professionalism of the people around the stage on me, the impression we made. I mean, or just to put it in just really simple terms, I just thought like, we were so badass. I mean, we just kicked ass at those shows.
You guys were awesome, man. You know, all the couple of years I watched you guys, whether it was the old lineup or the new lineup, and I know it's a new lineup even now with, you know, the changes and everything, but you guys were incredible. And that's top to bottom. That's everybody, Rich to Walt to you, you know, Shay Munoz, incredible vocals. Zach's a great guitarist. I encourage anybody to check out the Angry Bryans in moving forward with their shows, because a great sound. And, you know, it's unfortunate things didn't work out and everything. Everyone's kind of got, you know, different lives and things that don't always work out. It is what it is. But for a short time, when people can get together and make beautiful music, that really is special, Douglas. And, you know, to me, if you sum up music, think of it this way. It is a language of one. There's not a different word for a certain note, you know, in other languages. Music is universal to everybody.
Yes.
Same sound. That is what's beautiful about it. You don't have to translate it into another language. Music is music.
Right.
So
you're right.
It's a beautiful thing that has existed forever, and more music will be made in the future, you know, whether it be classical or it's rock or jazz or whatever. I mean,
right.
It's a beautiful thing. And yeah, I was so happy to be around and listen to you guys then in Vegas. That was awesome. And it was really cool. It was much like seeing players backstage after a game or something. Like, yeah. I go backstage and you guys would be all, you know, amped up and just kind of letting everything out. And I'd be like, wow, this is what rock stars are like back. Just like, let me decompress.
That's what I say.
Exactly.
I got to say, it was very kind of you to invite me, and I was very flattered to have actually somebody utter the sentence to me, and we can talk about your musical career.
Oh, Doug,
because because I feel like I've been like struggling all this time so that somehow I could begin one.
Well, what's the old, a tortured artist or whatever the phrase is. I know that with musicians, um, well, like any artist, I guess, like a painter, they paint for fun and, it's their canvas. With musicians, you do it because you love it. And it's not always about the accolades or the big money, and all those things are great, but people doing something because they love it and are passionate about it, to me, that's something that's always inspiring to me. And, whether you have a gold record someday or not, a musical career is still a musical career. So how would you sum up your journey, if you could, Doug, along the way from learning trumpet at an early age to playing the bass on Fremont Street?
How would I sum it up?
Still growing, still going, still.
I would say, yeah, still growing.
Continued?
The last year's been rough, but the band will get back going. Like I mentioned, I'm going to try and fill up some more of my time keeping up with chops and stuff by working with some other local musicians and getting back into the smaller venues and playing popular songs people like, and working on some of my other work. I'm looking forward to maybe branching out a little bit more as far as working on some of the other music that I write that doesn't fit the genre that the Angry Bryants works in. I
like that.
But that'll be a different chapter for me, It started a little bit before the pandemic with I would just take my guitar instead of my bass and just go around to the open mics and just sing and play guitar.
Wow.
And just do stuff I wrote and just see how it went over. And then I would make demos of it on my 8-track recorder and just do all the instruments myself just to see how it all fit together. And so I'm hoping to like do everything I do with the Angry Bryants, but then also do that at the same time, And I mean, if I could, I don't know if the Angry Bryants was definitely a great second job as far as income. And I missed that part too because of the pandemic. I definitely whittled down. I definitely had to tighten my belt, but I'm sure we've all experienced that. And then to compensate for it, it's easier to tighten your belt when you're not going out to eat as much and you're going to the movies and you make a little less, spend a little less, Well, before we go, do we have a few more minutes?
Yeah, I had one more question for you, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I mean, because we haven't talked in a long time. Are you still doing your athletic stuff?
No, it's funny how things change, right? So in March of 2020, when the world stopped turning for a second there, my baseball season ended. They shut it all down. College baseball.
Well, I imagine it was just like with us. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
most of the thing you do, it's like we can't do right.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do what you do anymore. It's like, okay, well, so it was really eye-opening for me to have that happen to anybody, to lose that. So I said, okay, I've had a good run. I have a ton of memories. I've traveled. I've done a lot of great things. I need to figure out something that is not, that is lockdown proof, basically, and start to kind of live that life. And if it's not something I have to completely walk away from, I can go back. But anyway, I stepped away from baseball umpiring. I needed a break anyway. And now I'm a FedEx courier, Douglas. I drive FedEx trucks, and I honestly, I couldn't be happier. I found a piece. I've been able to do podcasts for my hobby, and I am very much content right now.
And it'll wind up blossoming into more than a hobby.
Yeah, exactly. It's an addiction.
You never know. I mean, this is probably the first one I've watched some, but this is probably the first one I've participated in. But I mean, I think you present very professionally, so I think you'll gain an audience.
I appreciate that.
I agree with you that it's nice to have the pandemic proof gig too, because that's what helped me, because my musicians always like to say day gig, like they like it's not what I really do, but I do it to make. But anyway, but seriously though, but my day gig, I work for a property management company doing maintenance, and most of my work I do by most military, so I don't have to get within like 50 feet of anybody all day. So when they did the lockdown, it meant that like I went to work and I worked, and then I stopped at the store and got stuff, and then I went home.
Yeah.
But other than that, it didn't affect my job at all.
Well,
So my more glamorous second job was basically got the guillotine.
Yeah.
But I still had the regular job to fall back on. So I feel blessed in that, because unlike a lot of other people, I didn't have to scramble for money for food and rent.
Man, it was a dark time for a while. And, I think what is this, April 15th? This is about tax day. I know it's delayed and everything, but this time of year, you got to look at those pieces of paper and be like, okay, what brings in more money and pays for my life more? My fun hobby or my career job here? Well, there's a balance, right? So it's tough at times.
And I'm lucky that my daughter is grown and has her own career. So I could make decisions that I can regret later. And I'm not dragging anybody else into the wilderness doing it at this point,
Playing with house money, man. That's it's fun when people have the ability to do that, to try things. I had no idea what I was doing when I started this. I still don't. You're going to be like the fourth, I think, episode, if you're willing, of course, that's going to be on video. I just started doing a YouTube channel where some people want to see the conversation. I was like, okay, so here we are. So always evolving, always improving. That's the fun thing about it, is just doing it because you're passionate about it.
That's right.
Well, let me ask you one final question, Doug.
Okay.
I've been in plenty of, bars on a Saturday night, or Vegas or wherever, lounges where you're in the crowd, you look up, there's a live band. There's nothing better than a live band at a venue. And people are drinking, having a good time, dancing. I know what it's like to be in the crowd, looking up and hearing a good band. But what is it like for you and other musicians to be up on stage? You're not the main attraction necessarily. People are there to have a good time, to have some drinks and just blow off steam. Their eyes aren't glued to you. You're there, but they're there to dance and have a good time. What does that do for musicians on stage to look out and see people having a good time to your sound?
Wow. I'm trying to find words to express it really good. I mean, it adds a whole nother dimension to playing. I mean, there's the enjoyment I get by my sitting alone and writing music and having an idea that I like, and I record it and add another part, and I go, this is coming together. I'm really pleased with this. Then when I join my friends and we're playing, then that's a whole nother level. And then when we have an audience, and let's assume that it's an audience that's enjoying it a little bit, and like you said, depending on the venue and the audience, a lot of times you're like a jukebox with animatronic figures accompanying it, so it's sort of like, you know what I mean, not the focus. But you know what though, I've noticed it even in a little venue, there's always a few people, even though you might look out and there's people talking over you, and you just see them in profile because they're yelling across the table at each other. And right when I get to that part of the song where I do like my favorite part, where I can actually pull off this sort of soft vocal, and right in the middle of that note at the end, I hear some dude laugh at a table and go, dude, that was sick, like talking about something he saw on TV. That part's not always fun, but like you said, that's sort of what we're there for. But there's always a few people that will either be watching from the table, and there's always a few people that will get up and stand in front of the bandstand. And even if they just stand there and kind of move a little bit, I always love it when there's there's somebody that gets up and is just, or a couple people that get up and are just dancing and having a good time, as long as there's one or two, even it, like I said, it's, and then you're still playing with your friends. And so sometimes even if the venue isn't that exciting and the crowd reaction isn't all that great, you're still live and playing with your friends. And there's that extra electricity to it because you're all at your top, trying to be at the top of your game because you're not at rehearsal where you can goof up and stuff. Yeah. And if you play well, you pat each other on the back and, look forward to the next gig.
Yeah, well, I've umpired baseball games in front of, thousands of people, 10, 12,000 fans. I've also umpired it in front of 50 people, 100 people. The game is still the same. You still have to perform and be at your best. So there's something to be said for that. And you know what? I'll say this, Doug, at the end of the day, end of the week, end of everyone's work week, people need those musicians on stage to kind of just, blow everything off and be like, all right, I'm going to let off some steam here and dance a little bit and feel good.
And it's starting slowly. It's starting to happen again. I'm seeing it on my news feed. My friends, local bands of friends of mine that are like, we're at Second Phase Brewery on the 20th, come on down. And I feel like an idiot. I had a couple of friends that were like Travis Byler live on, November 13th. At the Crystal Palace, 7:00, and I'm drop by to visit another friend on my way there. Where are you going after this? Well, to Crystal Palace. I think they're just live streaming that, and I'm like, really? Damn it! I was like, oh, I thought they were going to actually let people in, but no, these are like they're trying to be safe, with the distancing and masks and all that, but the bands are starting to go out there and play again.
Well, I think everybody needs that. We need to get out. We need to hear live music. Just be around people. I think that's really healthy. And hopefully here in the very near future, that will be approved upon. And all the Bakersfield bars and venues will be full of live music once again. Douglas Kirk, I appreciate your time today. This has been so much fun catching up, talking about music. Any parting words of wisdom or anything you'd like to say as we wrap it up here?
Oh, parting words of wisdom. Wow. I mean, as far as being a musician, like you mentioned, Matthew, just do as much as you enjoy. Try not to make it too goal oriented. Try and have some, it's okay to dream, but try not to make it too much where you have this end result that you're going to be disappointed if you don't achieve that. And you can dismiss me if you like. If you're just starting out and you're talented, you can say, well, this is a guy that looks like he could be my grandpa's friend who isn't a big star, saying don't try and be a big star. I'm not saying don't try and be a big star, but I'm just saying you really need to enjoy it. And so don't get discouraged if you don't get all the that you don't get the reputation and all the appreciation and all the adulation and the fortune and everything that you think you deserve. Don't give up if you don't get that right away. You might never get to that super stratosphere. Statistically, most of us won't. But like I said, don't make that too big a part of it. If you enjoy it, you're going to find other people that enjoy what you do. And seriously, if you're already doing it, you're going to reflect on it eventually and realize that there's no giving it up anyway.
Yeah. You got to have fun, and it's about the relationships along the way. I got to imagine too, right? The people.
Oh yeah. I've met so many cool people and been able to travel places that were a direct result of me being involved in music and playing in bands.
Man. Well, Doug, very well said. I appreciate everything. Thank you for chatting with me. It's fun to bounce around different subject matter on my podcast. And today talking about music is something I think all of us can get behind, even if you don't play music. I think most of us like music. So to hear kind of the backstories and someone who's passionate about it, man, I definitely will take a lot of things with me today. I appreciate you coming on the program, Doug.
Thank you for the invitation, Matthew. And I look forward to future podcasts you do with other musicians.
Hey, I gotta put a few more together.
Anybody with that matter. What do you already have? What do you have scheduled next?
Well, we have a few. We have actually a comedian coming. We have a comedian on. We have I have another a friend of mine who's coming back on the program. He's a band guy. He does a lot of sound recording and sound engineer stuff. So
okay,
he'll be on here next week or so, somewhere in there. I'll keep you posted.
Excellent.
Wide range of guests. That's what we're shooting for. Doug, thanks again. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Matthew.
All right, guys.
Say hello to Valerie for me.
I shall do that. She was very excited the fact that I was recording with you. So she said, "Tell Doug hi." I said, "Of course, I'll tell Doug hi." You guys, yes, of course. Anyway, thanks again, Doug. Guys, thank you for listening to this edition of the Get Home Safe podcast. Have a great rest of your week. And as always, guys, no matter what you're doing, whether you're out on the town or round in third base, get home safe.